about this trip you took to the United States recently. When you arrived at the Detroit airport, you were questioned for 2 hours by federal agents about Gaza, Hamas, and other issues. U.S. agents only allowing you to enter the country after they copied the contents of your phone. Can you take us through what happened?
Gestapo.
Yes, I will do that, Amy, but if I may, and I think it connects to our previous conversation, I just want to say that there's something bigger here than just the question of the ICC and Israel abiding or not abiding by it. I think that's a moment of truth for the international tribunals such as the ICC and the ICJ, because they would face governments that would not probably implement the rulings because Israel still has very strong allies. And I think the rest of the world, especially the global south, would watch to see whether the terms universal and international really mean something. So I think Palestine is just one case of many in which we have now a real struggle to define again what is universal, what are universal values, and what is international justice. And I think that's why it's such an important historical moment. Now, come back to my ordeal, which was not that big, but I think is part of a bigger picture. I arrived in Detroit after 8 hours flight from London, and was taken immediately to a side room by 2 federal agents, and they had 2 sets of questions for me. One was about my views about the Hamas, my views about what's happening in Gaza. Do I frame what happened in Gaza as genocide? They wanted to know my reaction to the slogan, Palestine should be free from the river to the sea. They refused to tell me why they stopped me, why did I have to answer these questions. And then another set of questions had to do with whom do I know among the American Muslim community, the American Arab community, and the Palestinian community in the United States. And that was followed by taking my phone for a long period, copying everything in it, and making me wait another time for phone conversations before letting me into the country.
Can I ask you exactly, Professor Pape, what you answered them when they said, what do you take to be Palestine will be free from the river to the sea, when they asked you about whether genocide is being committed in Gaza, etc.?
Yes. Well, to the questions of do I define Hamas as a terrorist organization, to that I refuse to answer that question, and I suggested to them that they should go and listen to my talks in the Michigan area where I will discuss this issue. As for the question of genocide, I laconically said that yes, I do frame the Israeli actions in Gaza as genocide, but again, I suggested that if they want a more detailed analysis of why do I frame it like this, they are most welcome both to read my articles and to come to the lectures in the Michigan area. As for the question, how do I respond to the slogan, Palestine should be free from the river to the sea, I said that everywhere where there is a river and there is a sea and people living between them, they should be free.
That's right.
Which was a moment a bit ironical or comical when one of them tried to show me his geographical knowledge, and he said, so what about Saudi Arabia? So I corrected my phrase and I said, well, anywhere where there are countries between 2 sources of water, people should be free, which seemed to satisfy them at that particular moment. I have to say they were polite. I don't want to describe it as an ordeal. They were polite, but what really bothers me is why at all do they have the right to ask me, and what was the real subtext for this whole affair? And I have my own understanding of that, although I don't have the whole facts before me.
And Professor, you've been speaking to huge crowds of young people all around the world, and many of the students protesting U.S. support for the war against Gaza. One of your books, the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, has been much read in recent months. Could you talk about this? That the Nakba, or the cleansing of Palestine, didn't happen just in 1948, but there's been a process of the ethnic cleansing, even going back to the British Mandate period, as the British repressed the 1936 Arab revolt against British rule.
You see? Now you see?
Yes, indeed. The Nakba is a bit of a misleading term because it means in Arabic a catastrophe. But really, what the Palestinians suffered was not a natural catastrophe, but rather an ethnic cleansing, which is a clear policy motivated by clear ideology. And that policy was an integral part of the Zionist program for Palestine from the very inception of the movement in the late 19th century. Of course, very early on, they didn't have the capacity to ethnically cleanse Palestinians from their homeland. But already in the mid-1920s, when the Zionist community in Palestine was still very small, it was able, through purchase of land, on which there were many Palestinian villages, to convince the British mandatory power to evict 13 Palestinian villages, and that was in between 1925 and 1926.
The British.
And then slowly this process of buying land and evicting the people who lived on this for hundreds of years brought the Zionist movement into a moment where it purchased at least 6% of the land of Palestine, which was of course not enough. And then they went to the big ethnic cleansing of 1948. But as we know, it didn't stop in 1948. Israel continued to expel Palestinian villagers between 48 and 67 from among the Palestinian minority in Israel, which allegedly were citizens of Israel. Israel expelled 300,000 Palestinians during the 6 Days War in June 1967. And since June 1967 until today, about 600,000 Palestinians, in one way or another, were dislocated and uprooted by Israel. And of course, now we have a magnitude of or a case of ethnic cleansing that even overtakes the magnitude of the ethnic cleansing during 1948. So there is not one moment in the history of the Palestinians in Palestine, since the arrival of Zionism in Palestine, in which Palestinians are potentially under danger of losing their home, their fields, their businesses, and their homeland.
Finally, Ilan Pappé, as you'd express, more Palestinians have been killed in the last months than at any point in the last 76 years. More Palestinians have been forced to move, have been displaced than what happened at the Nakba at the time of the founding of Israel. What gives you hope? You are an Israeli historian esteemed throughout the world. You have less than a minute.
But many have attacked Egypt. Let's not forget that.
Yes. I would say that what gives me hope is that I do think that the Zionist project in Israel and Palestine, as we see it today, doesn't have long to live, to exist. I think we are seeing processes, important processes, that are leading to the collapse of the Zionist project. Hopefully the Palestinian National Movement and anyone else involved in Israel and Palestine would be able to replace this apartheid state, this oppressive regime, with a democratic one for everyone who lives between the river and the sea, and for all the Palestinians who were expelled from there since 1948 until today. I believe that this historical process has begun. Unfortunately, it will take time, and the next year or two are very precarious and are very dangerous, but in the long run, I'm really hopeful that there will be a different kind of life for both Jews and Arabs between the river and the sea under a democratic free Palestine.
Ilan Pape, Professor of History and Director of the European Center for Palestine Studies at the University of Exeter. Happy belated birthday to Samin Farkandeh and today to Tamari Studio. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
There's no one-size-fits-all puberty experience. If you're trans, intersex, or non-binary, know that you're not the only one feeling confused. For some intersex people, puberty may start later than age 14. You might experience some of puberty's changes and not others, and your body may or may not go through puberty.
You know what I'm saying? You notice the whole time that they haven't mentioned anything about the Palestinian people being there before Netanyahu. Sorry about the commercial. Give my disclaimer. That's not lines. You know what I'm saying? But you notice he didn't mention anything about the Palestinian people not being there. But he mentioned the Zionist movement that was not there. The Zionist idea coming from the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, and all the other conglomerate Luciferian Baphomet worshiping motherfuckers. Sitting up there, creating this movement and calling it a Zionist. To give you that feeling of, and then you had the dude from Jehovah Witness. He goes over there and renamed a mountain in Africa that was named long before he even bought his Neanderthal Cro-Magnon bald-headed ass over there. Sleeping sitting on the mountain praying, and they go call the mountain Mount Zionai. This is their Jehovah leader. While they're talking about Jehovah Witnesses, you see, you ain't no more than Jehovah criminalists, if you ask me. And same thing happened with the Zionist movement. They feel that they created this story, this idea, this belief, this ideology, a story really. You have a psychological story that would make you think that this is real in all forms, even when you speak about the so-called Christ and God and there's Moses and all these different things. These stories were created by man in order to give themselves a narrative to be in charge within their society with their Romanistic neo-Nazi, whatever, Judeo-Christian of the holy, whatever, books. But those books were created by them. It doesn't matter who's looking for the oldest book. If you're looking for it on a paganite side, then you are in the wrong place. Those books are only good for the shit that they stole, that they put in the books that you might not find in other books or books they had at that time that got lost. But at the same time, it's not authentic to the understanding of Africa in itself as a whole, you see. It is only based on the fact of a man's writing at that time in his life that lived within probably that time. He could not be. None of us will know that per se, other than by the writing of the books. But who wrote the book could not have possibly be of his time, scientifically. So it had to have been written in an earlier time. You see what I'm saying? And by they saying this book is this old, that old, and this, that, and we not examining the book to its fullness, and it's being explained by Expedition Now and all kinds of fruit bowl, jackass, fucking idiot that jump up on YouTube or the TV or whatever and saying that's what the book says. In that, it is not so. So when they wrote this book talking about Israel and all this different shit, it was not an original books of original time because there was no Israel, as the man explained to you. It became some kind of cultic, Zionistical movement of secret society amongst the Rothschilds and them to create this thing called Israel and write a book, probably printing it off of maybe Gutenberg Press, we don't know, you know what I'm saying, or one of those printing press, because they didn't have a printing press not too long ago. That was an idea that they also stole. You know what I'm saying? Because, many people didn't use that. There was no need for it because many were scribes and knew how to write down many of this information over time. You know what I'm saying? Coming with the printing press, they didn't have it. You know what I'm saying? It was already created before they got a hold of it. And one of the first things he printed was the Mazarin Bible. You see what I'm saying? So many of these Bibles are not authentic Bibles to any kind of solar, galactic across the galaxy, creation or whatever you want to call creation, and the understanding of man in itself, woman and man and child in itself, as the man is always glorified, but never the woman in many ways. But we see many of these scriptural books are written in the ways that they can use these books in order to do the evil that they do. What you're seeing going on in Africa, Egypt, Ethiopia, and all of that, Sudan and so forth in that area, is all based on them just coming up with something and doing that. But it's not based on the truth, the right, and the understanding of the knowledge in which the science of it all has to be. That's an invasion into the science of it in itself. So by doing that, it was very easy in more ways over generation, pay attention, and time. You should know what that means, because point blank been explained that to you 100 times. So when we talk about generation and time, we're talking about my forefathers that may have been here maybe 100 years ago, of the lineage of my people. You know what I'm saying? Because everyone have a lineage. There is no way your parents got here without another parent before it that preceded her, or your father preceded him, and his father preceded him. So we know there is a lineage that links all the way very far when it comes to African people, especially. You see what I'm saying? Not with the Caucasian, though, and many other races. You know what I'm saying? Their lineage does not go back as far as ours do, and that's clear to see, clear to understand, because you cannot carbon date even African walk. So we know for what, and even the creation of many things that they created that they have stolen from Africa itself, that would have explained this to the world in more ways than one. So they created these books and wrote into these books what they want to write into the book, and over generation and time made it marinate by force. Inquisitions, what you think all the Inquisitions was about? You had the Spanish Inquisition, you had the English Inquisition, you had the British Inquisition, you had the American Inquisition, you had the Indian, even the native indigenous so-called people Inquisition. You probably even had an Inquisition on black people, you had an Inquisition on Egyptians, you had an Inquisition on all type of people. Now, what Inquisition means is it could be thoroughly up to you based on the scientific understanding of what you want it to be. But what it means to me in many of these Inquisitions is the killing of the old people who have the knowledge and may have wrote many of those books explaining the truth and what's really going on to their knowledge at that time, who are being murdered off, hanged and burned on these stakes. You know what I'm saying? Where you see look like a crusader sitting up there with a helmet on, and he got a spear, and he's sitting up there, while you look down below in the picture that they painted, you see books burning and people hanging naked going around in a circle. So they will hang like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people at one time. These were the type of Inquisitions they were doing. They were going around murdering people. When you talk about Inquisition, you ain't talking about nothing good to me. You know what I'm saying? And you were murdering off the people who had the knowledge, who had the wisdom, and many of this, and burning the books, so you make sure that the truth would never be seen or told. Same thing we have with Constantine. We know he went into Africa and did the same thing, and even renamed, I think it might have been even Timbuktu. Try to rename Timbuktu, one of those places, talking about the Library of Alexandria. And you get over to General Sawa Sultan Seti, and he'll explain more into that, because that's his specialty. You know what I'm saying? I know about it anyway, but he did the same thing. You know what I mean? It's the same thing the Zionists them did. The Jews, the Zionists, and all of that. If you notice, the knowledge of the teaching that they teach Jews is not a structural teaching at all. It is very racist. It is very saying that you are the above group of all human beings. He's saying that is something psychologically and ideologically shoved into your fucking brain. It has no structure at all or no platform to stand on. So this is why Netanyahu cannot explain anything truly into what he's talking about other than what has already been set up to fall that way. You know what I'm saying? He's speaking. Notice he didn't speak anything about Jesus Christ. Notice he didn't speak anything about many different things to do with the biblical scripture itself. The only thing he quoted was the fact of Israel, as if it had been embedded into people's brains so badly that they actually believe that shit. But notice what he used as his sympathetical balance was what happened to them in Germany. Now, what happened to them in Germany needs to be investigated more thoroughly, even to today. Much of the evidence and understanding of what took place was never truly explained. It was only explained on the narrative of what they say they wanted us to know. You know what I'm saying? But when you come to the underground roots of many of what went on, you would be shocked to know what truly happened. We're not going to explain that on this right now. So people need to start to pay attention as to how they use these Inquisition, Nicaea Council, and all these different things. Many of those councils and many of those things that took place in the fact of Inquisition and people even did it to the people on probably on the reservation, hanging and burning their books. It was a crusade. They went around the world and to cause this narrative to be sunk into the heads of the next generation and the next generation. And then they even do shit to that generation. So when that comes along, this generation begins to fall off on this one. Same as you see in the neighborhood. That's why things in the black community and many different neighborhoods and different places, it doesn't matter where it could be a trailer park, always had that same narrative of the group of the people and their conditions and so forth on. These are things that are created systematically, such as you see when you see the Holy Bible and so forth on. That is no more than a set of matrix that were put into the minds of the people over generation again and time. You should understand what I mean by that. You're not a kid anymore. So therefore, when we say that, you know it had to be your mother, your mother, all the way to you. You know how many generations have passed? Okay, so at the same time, that is how it's done. So by the time it gets all the way down, same thing with the Demon Democrats. If you're black, vote Demon Democrat, using the Black Caucus Party, many black civil rights leaders and many other parties to convince us and confuse and keep us all fucked up in the head. And same thing in other countries, not just here, and all the way to you. So when it gets to you now, the only narrative you have is probably of your mother, and probably she was too lazy, or maybe she just didn't know, or maybe the same thing was done to her, and she is not going to teach you the truth. The only thing she's going to teach you is what she knows, and it's as simple as that. So by the time it gets to that point and you feel it's been another billion, zillion people gone and another zillion people come, you know what I'm saying, those children might not know because their parents are not consciously bound in the science of the groove of it all. Like I was fortunate to do. You know, there's a lot more that I can tell you, but many of it still has to do with the strength of your research. Your research is so important now in this matter because is this so-called invading people of fakeism, religion, and so forth, invading and talking about the Zionists and having a Zionist movement, a cult, and then go, so they can just choose to go into Egypt and start killing everybody. First they started with removing the African people because that's how the Jewish people got involved in the fact of removing the African people from Egypt and probably using the Arabs to do it and then sell us off to them. You know what I'm saying? Some bullshit like that. And before you know it, 95% of the African people were removed from that plateau. You know what I'm saying? And they're still going around to them, murdering them off the Darfur regions and many other regions of Africa in itself that we need to take a long look at, because many's talking about while Netanyahu and Zionist group bullshit lying ass is talking about Hitler and what happened in Germany, he calling that a Holocaust. But what about the Holocaust that happened to black people, you motherfucker? And then you're sitting up there talking this bullshit when you invaded our land and you have been murdering my people for generations and generations, long before even the Palestinians were getting done up. You know what I'm saying? So don't come with that bullshit, because you see 95% of the people in America could possibly be Egyptian descent in itself. So don't give us that bullshit. Wake up. It's time to drive the tyrants from the land. And the international court needs to have more power and force to be able to remove and go after tyrants who have committed genocide against humanity, or even treasonous that cause genocide of human race of people within their own country, and so forth, such as what we saw in the Bosnia situation in South Africa and many different African crooked leaders here, crooked leaders every motherfucker, where genocided races of people and burying them in mass graves and then trying to cover it up and doing crazy shit like this, the Luciferian piece of shit genocide garbage to depopulate and all kinds of bullshit and remove and this and that religion and all kind of this. So we must start to wake up to a lot of this shit, and the international courts need our support, and the world must stand up and bring forth a case before the world court in order to get the world court to get what it needs to be able, and all nations must respect the world court based on the law that is given. When you have committed genocide, there should be no holding back to get to that individual if it's proven even in his own country that he have committed genocide. So this is Point Blank saying, stay right, stay tight.